But Kristen, what I just said is I don't agree with that. What I think actually undermines people's confidence in the electoral system is when the media is incurious about obvious examples of problems in our electoral system. I think we've got great elections, but a lot of things could be better in certain states. I want to work to make that happen so the American people have greater confidence in their elections. That's what I'll keep doing.
Hey everybody. So in this video, we're going to take a look at a debate between JD Vance and one of the most vile interviewers in history named Kristen Welker. We're going to watch this one together, but what I expect out of her is to be rude, to interrupt JD Vance anytime he's answering a question in a manner that she doesn't approve of. It should be interesting, and it should also kind of infuriate you because that's just the nature of this woman. She loves to set an improper narrative to cater to her viewers, to her bosses, essentially, the ones that hand down the orders from the deep state, we'll call it, from the swamp. And I'm looking forward to watching this one along with you guys. I have a snoring dog at my feet, so if you can hear, I apologize. But let's go ahead and have a look at this video.
Thank you so much for being here. I want to talk to you about the immunity ruling and the implications. This is what Donald Trump said last year about wanting to target his political opponents. Take a listen.
I will appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the most corrupt president in the history of the United States of America, Joe Biden, and the entire Biden crime family.
Senator, if former President Trump were to win, if you were to be his vice president, would you support him appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, the Bidens?
Well, first of all, Kristen, I find it interesting how much the media and the Democrats have lost their mind over this particular quote. Donald Trump is talking about appointing a special prosecutor to investigate Joe Biden for wrongdoing. Joe Biden has done exactly that for the last few years and has done far more in addition to that to engage in a campaign of lawfare against his political opposition. I think what Donald Trump is simply saying is we ought to investigate the prior administration. There are obviously many instances of wrongdoing. The House Oversight Committee has identified a number of corrupt business transactions that may or may not be criminal. Of course, you have to investigate to find out. So I think Donald Trump saying, look, let's do the basic work of investigating wrongdoing is a totally reasonable thing for him to do. And frankly, the Biden administration has done far worse. So if you think that what Donald Trump is proposing is a threat to democracy, isn't what Biden has already done a massive threat to our system of law and government?
Senator, just to be very clear, though, Joe Biden didn't appoint a special prosecutor. The Attorney General did that. Trump was indicted by grand juries. He was found guilty by a jury of his peers in New York. But can we just go back to the core question here? Would you support him taking such an action? It sounds like you're saying, yes, you would.
I would absolutely support investigating prior wrongdoing by our government. Absolutely. That's what you have to have in a system of law and order, Kristen. But I have to reject the premise here. Joe Biden appointed the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who, of course, answers to Joe Biden, can be fired by Joe Biden. So the idea that the Biden administration has nothing to do with the appointment of the special prosecutor, I think, completely betrays a misunderstanding of how our system of government actually works. And of course, Kristen, we have to make this point, Kristen, that the prosecution of Donald Trump in New York, which I think now is fundamentally been thrown in doubt by this immunity case, it was one of the main guys was a Department of Justice official in the Biden administration who jumped ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after Donald Trump.
And yet the DOJ
if that
told
doesn't make you question the legitimacy of the prosecution, that's a problem.
Well, Senator, that happens all the time. People are appointed from Washington, but the DOJ told Congress, testified this week
Kristen,
that it reviewed
it happens.
Hold on, Senator,
are
let
you
me
really
finish.
saying, Kristen,
Senator,
it
let
happens,
me finish my
it happens
sentence,
all
then
the
I'll
time?
let you finish. Hold on.
The number.
Let me just finish this. The DOJ told Congress this week it reviewed all communications since Biden took office and found no contact between federal prosecutors and those involved with that case in New York. Can you stick to the substance of the question, though? Let me just ask, because I just want to stick with this line of theory that you are laying out, which is you are saying it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department. If it's not okay for Joe Biden to weaponize the Justice Department, as you say, which there's no evidence of that, why is it okay for Donald Trump to do that?
Well, Kristen, first of all, you said that it happens all the time, that the number 3 person in the Department of Justice jumps ship to join a local prosecutor's office to go after the president's political opponent. I don't think that's ever happened in the history of American democracy, and I don't think that we should legitimize it. Now, if Donald Trump's attorney general had his number 2 or his number 3 jump ship to a local prosecutor's office in Ohio or Wisconsin, and that person then went after Donald Trump's political opposition, that's a different conversation.
Senator,
all he's suggesting is that we should investigate credible arguments of wrongdoing. That's all that Donald Trump is saying. That is not a threat to democracy. That's merely reinforcing our system of law and government.
Bottom line, you are okay with Donald Trump appointing a special prosecutor to go after his political enemies, which would include Joe Biden. You're just, to button that up, it sounds like you're saying yes. Let me move on, though, to my next question.
So you can already see that we're getting a little bit of a taste of Kristen Welker's interview tactics. She likes to cut JD Vance off when he's giving his answer because he's explaining it well enough for the viewers to understand. Like when he said that it's unprecedented that the third person, the number 3 ranked person at the DOJ, would demote themselves to become a prosecuting attorney to join the prosecution team. And ironically, that prosecution team just so happens to be going up against the current frontrunner at the time, which was Joe Biden, his opponent, which was Donald Trump. Which not only is it unprecedented, it's a self-demotion, and it's pretty fishy in my eyes. And of course, this was all still while Joe Biden was the front runner of the Democratic ticket, which since then, he has actually admitted to being forced out by Nancy Pelosi. And let's just quickly take a look at this article over here from the New York Post. Biden admits he was pushed out of the presidential race, name drops Pelosi in first interview since the exit. So President Biden all but admitted he was pushed out of the presidency race by Democratic Party elites and specifically name-dropped former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in his first TV interview since the tectonic news last month. Biden said that Dems in the House and Senate were worried that he'd drag down their chances of being reelected. He said he believed his reelection bid would face too many distractions if he carried on. See, and this is important because it just goes to show that these people only care about getting reelected. They did it for their own sake rather than doing it for the country. They weren't willing to let the American people vote on who they believe is the best. They had to replace Joe Biden so that they themselves had a better chance in their eyes to be reelected, because people are going to simply vote against the Democratic Party down ticket like they should with Joe Biden as the front runner. It doesn't change, which doesn't change with Kamala being the front runner, okay? She's basically out here making promises that if she's elected, she's going to do this or that, but she didn't do it over the last 3.5 years, so why would we expect her to change that? I mean, just recently she came out and said no tax on tips, but the reality of that is she was the person that was the deciding vote to actually tax harder those tips, which of course she stole from Donald Trump. That was originally an idea from Ron Paul. So let me just read a quote from Joe Biden, which I'm sure is polished up by the interviewer. A number of my Democratic colleagues in the House and Senate thought that I was going to hurt them in the races, and I was concerned if I stayed in the race, that would be the topic. So you'd be interviewing me about why did Nancy Pelosi say something, and I thought it'd be a real distraction, he told CBS News Sunday morning. Okay, so yeah, I'm sure he stuttered and said some nonsense in there, but they cleaned it up and polished it like they always do, right? All right, now let's get back to this debate here.
Let me move on, though, to my next question. I want to talk to you about the Heritage Foundation. It's a conservative think tank in Washington. It shapes the agenda they would like to see in a Trump second term. The president said this after the Supreme Court's ruling this week. Take a look.
We're in the process of taking this country back. No one in the audience should be despairing. No one should be discouraged. We ought to be really encouraged by what happened yesterday. We are in the process of the Second American Revolution, which will remain bloodless if the left allows it to be.
Do you support those calls for a revolution, and would political violence ever be justified?
Well, of course, political violence is never justified, Kristen. You'll have to ask the president of the Heritage Foundation to defend his remarks if you'd like to do that. I will say, look, the Heritage Foundation does a lot of good work. It does a lot of things that I disagree with, a lot of things that I agree with. But the Heritage Foundation is a nonprofit organization that works on public policy, and I think it's an important part of how D.C. functions and operates. We'll continue to have important conversations in the Republican Party with a whole host of think tanks from the right and from the left as we craft public policy. That's the way the city works. And again, I'm not going to be the person who serves as the spokesperson for the Heritage Foundation. I don't have any affiliation.
sounds like you're distancing yourself from those comments, that talk of political violence.
Look, Kristen, I certainly don't think political violence is justified. That's certainly actually not what I think that Kevin Roberts was saying to begin with. But again, have him on your program to defend what he said, and I think that's the best thing to do.
Let me ask you specifically about Project 2025 for our viewers so that they know. It's basically a policy blueprint for a second Trump presidency. It's supported by the Heritage Foundation and other conservative groups.
Oh, here we go. Project 2025 fear-mongering. It's getting really old, and it's really obvious the scare tactic fear-mongering nonsense that the left mainstream media keeps pushing on the people. Regardless of what Project 2025 has in it, Donald Trump has disavowed it, but she is not going to mention that part.
Foundation and other conservative groups. The Biden campaign has said Project 25, quote, should scare every single American. It would give Trump limitless power over our daily lives. Among the things they are calling for is reversing approval of the abortion pill, mifepristone. But Donald Trump says he supports access to that pill, actually. Do you support access to abortion medication as Donald Trump does?
Well, Kristen, you asked about Project 2025, and I want to be clear here. That Trump explicitly has said his own transition team runs the Trump transition and will run the Trump administration. Again, you have a whole host of organizations, some of which have good ideas, some of which have bad ideas, and some of which have both. And I'm sure the Trump administration will talk to a lot of people as it's crafting an agenda to bring back American manufacturing jobs, to lower inflation, and to bring peace and prosperity back to the world. That's the whole reason why me and so many others are trying to reelect Donald Trump, is because the agenda actually worked. It was his agenda, and I think it'll work again for the American people. On the question of the abortion pill, what so many of us have said is that, look, we certainly don't, the Supreme Court made a decision saying that the American people should have access to that medication. Donald Trump has supported that opinion. I support that opinion. I think it's important to say that we actually have to have an important conversation in this country about what our abortion policy should be. Donald Trump is the pragmatic leader here. He's saying most abortion policy is going to be decided by the states. We want to make it easier and more affordable for young women and parents to have families to begin with. We want to lower housing costs, eliminate those surprise medical bills that so many families see after they have a baby. That's the Trump and Republican approach to this issue. Meanwhile, Joe Biden wants taxpayer-funded abortion up to the moment of birth. It's so crazy to me how the Democrats frame this as Republicans. Just let me finish, Kristen. They frame Democrats as being reasonable and pragmatic, when in reality, Republicans are the one trying to find some common ground here.
As you know, very few abortions take place later in pregnancy, and almost always because there is a medical emergency. I know Trump is trying to distance himself from Project 2025, but we have to point out that a number of people who are involved with it are former Trump officials, Ben Carson, Peter Navarro, Russ Vought, and others. But just to be clear, you support mifepristone being accessible.
Wow, so she actually acknowledged that Donald Trump is distancing himself from Project 2025, although she tries to bring it up in the beginning and let it cook for a little while, and then she tries to bring in, well, some of his associates are associated with it. So, I mean, it's like, just let it go. I can tell you why they won't let it go. They're going to use it as a reason to scare people away from voting for Donald Trump. It's the simple, age-old Democratic tactic that you don't necessarily vote for their candidates, you vote against their opponent, right? Because you're so scared of what the opponent's going to do. Well, Donald Trump was president for 4 years. He has a precedent, and his policies were pretty good. We had no new wars. We started moving towards peace in the Middle East. Housing was affordable. Gas was affordable. Groceries were affordable. And then Joe Biden went and removed the cap on insulin, then reinstated it like it was his own idea, because these Democrats don't have an original thought in their brain, just like Kamala Harris is doing with this no tax on tips thing. The only thing that they're focused on is doing the opposite of what the Republican Party wants, which ironically, the Republican Party, at least MAGA, wants to make America great for all Americans. I mean, even like Vivek Ramaswamy recently said, make it greater than it's ever been. Okay, so it's not about making America great again. It's about making America greater than it's ever been for all Americans, no matter who they are. But the Democratic Party is against that. That's what you need to understand. And that's why it's so important that we as people go out and vote this year for Republicans down ticket. I'm not saying that the Republican Party is perfect. I believe there should be term limits, and some of these old people need to be out of there because they're just so stuck in their ways, and they're also probably being paid by so many lobbyists and other companies that have their own agenda. But the fact remains that one party is pro-America and the other party isn't. And that's also indicated by the fact that Kamala Harris passed on frontrunner Josh Shapiro to be her running mate and went with this Walz guy. They're siding with Hamas. They're siding with the side that doesn't like America. They're siding with the pro-socialist people. Walz said on camera that one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. He's pro-socialism and he's also anti-free speech. And that's something that we should not have in our government at all, at any level, especially in the White House. So we need to go down and vote early this year. As soon as early voting starts, vote for Republicans down ticket and show the Democrats that the path that they're leading us on is not approved by the American people.
Yes, Kristen, I do. But again, on the Project 2025 issue, what the media and the Democrats are trying to do is attach its most unpopular elements to the Trump administration. It's a 900-page document. I guarantee there are things that Trump likes and dislikes about that 900-page document, but he is the person who will determine the agenda of the next administration. All he said very explicitly is, I am in charge of the next administration because I'm the person running for president. It's just important to make that clarification.
Let me ask you something that caught our eye. This is something you wrote in the New York Times op-ed in 2017 about former President Barack Obama. You criticized his policies, but you also said, quote, "It is one of the great failures of recent political history that the Republican Party was too often unable to disconnect legitimate political disagreements from the fact that the president himself is an admirable man. For at a pivotal time in my life, Barack Obama gave me hope that a boy who grew up like me could still achieve the most important of my dreams. For that, you write, I will miss him. And the example he set," you wrote that just days before Donald Trump was inaugurated. Do you still consider Barack Obama to be an admirable man who you miss?
Well, you know, I grew up in a broken family, Kristen, and I just wanted to be a good husband and dad. And certainly Barack Obama, despite my many political disagreements with him, he's clearly a good husband and a father. By the way, I'd say the same thing about Donald Trump, whose children love him. And I think this is one of the things the media often misses about Trump, is how genuinely devoted he is to his family, to his grandchildren, and how part of his pro-life messaging, his fundamental pro-life view, is that we ought to make it easier for more American families to have those thriving children and thriving families. So certainly I think we've been blessed with a lot of good examples across our country. And yeah, absolutely. Was Barack Obama a good president? No. Was he a good husband and father? Yes.
So he's still an admirable man?
That's just what I said, Kristen. Absolutely.
All right.
Most importantly, Kristen, we're just trying to work to elect Donald Trump. Whoever his vice president is, he's got a lot of good people he could choose from. It's the policies that worked and the leadership style that worked for the American people. I think we have to bring that back to the White House, and I'm fighting to try to do that.
Well, here we are about a week before the Republican convention. Before I let you go, can you say unequivocally here and now that you will accept the results of the 2024 election no matter what they are?
So long as it's a free and fair election, Kristen, of course we will. We will use constitutional processes to challenge issues if we think there are issues. But if it's a free and fair election, we will do what the Constitution requires. We will respect the results, and I expect those results are going to be to re-elect Donald Trump.
It was a free and fair election in 2020. Donald Trump took his concerns to court. He lost in court, but he still has not conceded. Do you understand that when you refuse to commit unequivocally, that feeds into people's concerns, skepticism about the nation's electoral process?
Well, Kristen, I don't agree with that, actually. I think that feeding into people's concerns about our electoral process is that one half of America's political segment, they won't support legislation that makes it harder for illegal aliens to vote. They won't support universal voter ID in our elections, even though you have to present ID to do almost anything in this country. I think taking people's concerns seriously about election fraud is the way to reinforce security and confidence in our elections.
Yeah, Senator, it's already against the law for non-citizens to vote. But just on that very point, when others refuse to say, yes, we will accept the election results, do you understand how that undermines people's confidence in the electoral system?
But Kristen, what I just said is I don't agree with that. What I think actually undermines people's confidence in the electoral system is when the media is incurious about obvious examples of problems in our electoral system. I think we've got great elections, but a lot of things could be better in certain states. I want to work to make that happen so the American people have greater confidence in their elections. That's what I'll keep doing.
You know, she says that it's against the law, but I wonder if those laws were upheld, and I hope and I expect that they will be in this one. And when she talks about affecting the confidence of people, she's not considering all Americans. She's just talking about the Democratic Party. Okay, she's only representing one side. And honestly, I don't think she even deserves to have this interview with JD Vance. I don't know why Republicans keep going on these platforms and letting these people spew their nonsense. Because the narrative that they set in the framing of their questions is only reinforced if not defended or answered properly. And regardless, I don't believe that it's changing anyone's opinion that is already set on voting Democrat. But ultimately, I do believe that he did a good job, and if you agree with that, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Maybe share this video. That's what really helps out the most, and I'll see you guys in the next one.